started this website called learn8bit.com. Basically, I've started getting into like hacking existing devices and doing Raspberry Pi, getting back into Linux and such. And day to day, I'm a software developer. Been one for about 20 years. But most of the time, you find you work at such a high level that you really don't know like how these things really work on the very detailed level. So I started exploring around, and I found a website called Emulator 101, in which you build an emulator in C. I guess it's the 8080 processor, and then you make a game. You make Space Invaders, and that's the CPU that was in the Space Invaders arcade game. So I got like really pumped when I got my Space Invaders game working, and I was actually able to play it. That was like, wow! It was kind of like this moment for me. I know, very geeky, right? Anyways, and then a little bit later, a couple weeks later, I found another set of YouTube videos about by Ben Ader, and he builds a breadboard CPU. So he breaks down the components of the CPU and builds them with just regular chips and LEDs and switches and stuff, and that was really, really cool. And so I really didn't feel like getting all that stuff and building something that would take up more space. So what I decided to do, being a software developer, was to basically write an emulator for his breadboard, and that's pretty well coming along. I think that's going to be my first set of videos, but I wanted to take some time just to introduce this website, learn8bit.com, and it's basically going to be a place for me to collect like all the information about the topics I'm interested in, and probably I'll write a lot of emulators, maybe some in C, and probably a lot in JavaScript and HTML for various reasons. But I just wanted to give you an overview, I guess kind of the scope of what I'm going to be exploring. I mean, shoot, I guess it's going to take years to get through all this. But hopefully, I'll learn some stuff. I can document it. We can share it. Maybe there's maybe one or two people in the world that are interested in this level of detail. I don't know. We'll see. Anyway, so getting onto my bullet points here, I want to explore hardware and software configurations within the context of arcade games. I really like the classic. Growing up in the '80s, liked all the arcade games. And it's really cool. I really like developing the emulator and getting the game to work. I mean, for me, it was kind of like in Jurassic Park, when they finally take the dinosaur DNA and they get like a real dinosaur. This source code is like that. I mean, you're bringing the source code to life, and especially in an emulator, it doesn't know that it's not running on hardware, and that's like really cool when it actually behaves exactly like you're used to playing the games. So yeah, I'm really interested in doing stuff kind of in the realm of games and kind of learning and gaming together. All the classic stuff, emulating Commodore 64, with the 6502 processor, the old Atari 2400, and things from the 80s. And the good thing about that is, they have enough detail, but they're not like overly complicated. I mean, the stuff today is just, I think if you tried to learn on that, I mean, it would just like your head would explode. So going back to some things that you're familiar with, and they're simple, but you can learn some really good concepts. And I think once you get those basic, kind of 8-bit lessons, then you can go on to other things. But we're just going to kind of stick to old school retro stuff for now. So arcade games, home computers, gaming consoles. I want to learn about even a 4-bit CPUs like the Intel 404. I want to explore concept of how the CPU addresses ROM, RAM, and the devices, because it's not just about the CPU; it's how the CPU interacts with the devices on the oh, my screen just went to sleep. How it works with devices on the board and external devices. And then, you know, like right now I've the programs, you know, there's no BIOS or OS on these kind of very simple emulators, but you know, as computers got more and more sophisticated, they did develop, you know, BIOS, which is, you know, basic input output systems, and then the OS. You know, how do your programs interact with that? You know, how are programs compiled and linked? You know, DLLs, you know, shared objects on Linux. You know, what's the mechanics of all that? How does that really work? I think, you know, by understanding these concepts, you know, you get a device that you want to hack or you want to repurpose, you want to like reprogram. If you know how computers like boot up and stuff, I think that will give you a lot of insight into how to like repurpose and basically, you know, erase what's on there, and you know, being able to look at the chips and say, oh, you know, writing a new program and kind of like hijacking the device to do what you want it to do. You know, we throw so much stuff away. You know, if you know, basically most of the stuff we have, they're small computers, and so, you know, if you can get them to do something else, I think that's you know, really cool. So of course, you know, I want to teach programming, and I'm of course a maker, and so I want to use these maybe to you know, kind of teach some programming skills. I mean, a lot of it will be, you know, going over the emulators and show how they work and kind of learning that, but on the flip side, I do want to go through and show how I build those tools. I think that's interesting. Of course, emulators, I think that if you build them, you get a very deep understanding of how they work, because you have to simulate everything. So, I mean, there's no detail that you can leave out, because if you do, they don't work. And so, you know, I remember way back in college, you know, I did some assembly, but you know, I've never really used those. And so, you know, these simple emulators, you know, that's what you're coding in. So, you know, making assemblers, disassemblers, and, you know, maybe even getting into some very simple, I know compilers are kind of complicated, but maybe develop some simple compilers, you know, to learn a little bit about that. And kind of big picture, I have this kind of crazy concept called Arcade Remix, and basically I'm going to make a barcade, which is kind of like, you can imagine, a mini arcade game that's going to be run with couple Raspberry Pis inside. So I have this concept called Arcade Remix, and what I want to do is have the ability to play, like, not play multiple games simultaneously, but kind of play them in a series. So, like, imagine you're playing like Space Invaders, and then you die. Well, then you have to go to a next game. Like, maybe you have to play Pac-Man. And I think the cool thing about having the emulators is you can actually go into the memory of the game. I mean, you can alter the game. I mean, like, imagine if you could play Pac-Man 2-player mode, where the second player could be a ghost. I mean, you could make those kind of hacks and, you know, reach into the game and get the high score. And so you could have an individual game score, and you could also have kind of a composite score across all games. I think that would be, like, really cool. Just really kind of mix it up and do kind of crazy stuff. You know, having an intimate knowledge of the code, not just, you know, running it as is, but, you know, running it with some kind of a, you know, neat twist. I think that will be interesting. So overall, you know, I kind of want to apply my skills to that make project. And lastly, but I think this is really important, I really want to share what I learned with others. You know, I've gotten so much out of, you know, the internet and, you know, a couple of specific websites, and, you know, I'm really enjoying a lot of YouTube videos right now. So yeah, I want to contribute to that. I'm definitely not a cinematographer or you know, any kind of expert with that. You can see probably the lighting on this video is pretty crappy, but, you know, I think I'm going to focus more on, like, content and sharing cool stuff versus, you know, making slick videos. I mean, hopefully you'll forgive me for you know, being lazy, but we'll see. I mean, maybe you know, I'll get flamed and then I'll have to make better stuff. We'll see. All right, well, thanks.